So it seems to me that a lot of videos on YouTube about transitioning into this industry are like very flashy and gimmicky and loud and not super helpful because people want to give you concrete answers for questions that absolutely don't have them. And I felt like now that I've been in the industry for about a year, seemed like a good time to make a similar video while it's fresh in my head, while I'm still, relatively new to this. So my story is kind of unique, so I guess take it with a grain of salt. It's obviously not going to translate to everybody in every situation. Maybe there's a nugget in there that you can find useful. So I've been in this role 9 months, 10 months now. Before that, and I've had, various jobs and, varying levels of, technicality and complications since graduating with a math degree. Before this job, I was in arguably a blue-collar position. I climbed smokestacks for a living and did air quality testing on their emissions and stuff, which was kind of technical, but at the end of the day, I'm spending 10 hours a day on a smokestack and I'm getting dirty and using tools and being in the sun outside all day, and no matter what the weather is. So I would call it essentially blue collar. But anyhow, and I grew pretty fed up with that. It wasn't a job that I wanted to have to begin with, but at that time the economy wasn't great because of COVID, and I took what I could get because I needed something. And the pay, it wasn't great to start out with. It got better as time went on, but it wasn't great. Certainly not compared to what I make now. And I did that for 2 years, and about a year in, I decided that, well, I knew for a fact that I couldn't do it forever because I was going to be moving at a certain point. That was like kind of a hard deadline for my wife's education and subsequent job. And I knew I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to work, I didn't want to do back-breaking stuff out in the elements in the rain and brutal sun and snow, 365 days a year. And I was doing that on the road, which is terrible for obvious reasons. And I just grew so fed up with my job that, I found the motivation to start coding in my spare time. So, like I said, I was working on the road, so I'm staying in hotels, 4 to 5 days a week. I would get off after a 10-hour day, and I would code for 1 to 3 hours, depending on my energy levels. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I made some friends on Twitter, and I was connected with a particular guy who's now become a really good IRL friend. And I explained to him what I wanted and the fact that I was willing to do anything to get it, basically, because I was so fed up. And he said, well, I have a proposition for you. I have something that I want to make. It's full stack. I can't really pay you to do it. If I do, it's going to be single-digit dollars per hour. But it's full stack, and it's going to be the experience you want and need, and it's going to be a massive learning experience. And I said, that's fine. I don't want any money. Just serve as my, my manager effectively. Let's pretend this is a real job, and, give me what you want me to do, and we'll go from there. So that's what we did. He gave me a full stack project, which we did intend on shipping, but we ultimately didn't. It kind of fizzled out, but that project was completed. Like I said, it was full stack, so I learned everything. That's when I first started learning Django and doing stuff in Postgres and dealing with front end stuff and dealing with all the magic in the middle and all the stuff that dealt with taking payments and managing a user base and all this other good stuff. And that was great. That was wonderful. And like I said, he's become a really good friend, and now, we have a group chat and we all talk as professionals in the industry, which is a really great full circle moment. But anyhow, so while I was traveling, I tried to code, at least 2 to 3 days a week. Obviously I can't always. If I have a terrible day or a really long day and I don't have the energy, well, my day job, my W-2 comes first, so I can't always do it. But I tried to have consistent motivation, treat it like, a part-time job, in the sense that I needed to study. It needed to have all of my attention, and I needed to do it well if I was going to spend my very, very precious spare time on it, which is what I did. So I worked with my friend on this for, I don't know, about 6 months on and off. It kind of ebbed and flowed with my availability and my motivation and his time to help me, as a father of several children and his own very demanding day job, etc., etc. Our schedules didn't always line up, which kind of is what it is when you're doing projects with friends on the side. But like I said, I completed it, and then I started applying for jobs strictly as an entry-level guy, and anything I could find, really. I just threw everything I could at the wall, hoping that something would stick. And ultimately, I did get an interview, and it was very, very lucky to get that interview and to get that job and to still be doing that job. So that was a massive weight off my shoulders, because I knew I was going to be moving. I knew I needed a job, and I knew I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore, because it was brutal and tiring, and I never got to see my wife. And that was a problem, because we wanted to start having children. So that was extremely satisfying to decide what I wanted to do, make a concerted effort for, probably at least a year of coding and learning stuff, and then finally getting a job in the industry. And, you see my username. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I really do have a job. I really do this for a living. So that's my backstory. So as far as my job goes, it's kind of an interesting situation. It's kind of unique in the sense that I'm on a development team of one. Most of what I do is DevOps, but the DevOps that I do relates to things that I built. So it's probably 50-50 DevOps and actual development, software development. So I've made a handful of apps and internal services that my coworkers use, that other departments use, and I'm working on things right now that will be used across the organization as a whole, which is very cool and intimidating and exciting. But I'm on a development team of one. My boss is not a developer by trade. He is a product owner. All he knows is SQL, and so that presents its own challenges and interesting quirks. And I work in a department that is very non-technological. So all that to say, I kind of work in a vacuum. I don't have anyone to discuss my job with, ideas, suggestions, wisdom, which is why it's good to have friends in the industry, which more on that later. So everything I do, and also because I work in a non-technological department, and because I'm kind of like the first employee in this role, in this department, I kind of have a lot of leeway to make suggestions, to build things as I see fit. I have a lot of autonomy, which is probably mostly unheard of in this industry, which is obviously a double-edged sword. But as long as you are serious about it and you know how to learn things well in an enterprise setting for enterprise applications, then it can be gravy, because you don't have people breathing down your neck, you don't have people changing things that you built, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm working alone. So everything I do by myself. It's development, that's unit testing, that's CI/CD pipelines, that's all of this stuff. So on top of having to learn all this stuff, because this is my first job in the industry, and DevOps, there's so much to know. There's almost too much to know. That can be overwhelming. So in addition to having to learn a lot of stuff, I have to be able to implement it in an enterprise setting and know that it's going to work, which again presents its own challenges, double-edged sword, etc. A lot of my experience is very unique in that respect, so don't take anything I'm saying as gospel by any means, but I still do a fair bit of development that gets seen by other developers and other people from time to time. So yeah, I'm nearing on a year in this DevOps kind of development role. It's a little hazy. but I am building things and I am shipping them and I am creating pipelines for them beginning to end. And I do all of this by myself. So with all of this in mind, after nearly a year of relatively successful experience, I would say, I just made a rather straightforward list of things that I feel are important for someone who is not yet in the industry in some form, whether that's DevOps or front end or back end or full stack or what have you. I feel like most of this applies to all of these people, all of these roles. And I just thought I'd share them. And again, maybe there's a nugget you find in there that's helpful to you. Maybe it's not relevant. Take what you want and leave the rest. So these aren't in any particular order, but the first I'll say is to make friends with people in the industry. When you're new to this, not only new to the industry, but also new to development and coding meaningful things. When I say meaningful, I mean size, in terms of size and complexity, not whether or not it's important to you personally or professionally, but challenging things, I should say, is very, very helpful to have friends who are very experienced in something tangential to what you're doing or similar to what you're doing, and or who work in the industry, because not only can they help debug your code, they can give you career advice. They can say, it's best to use, I would suggest using this framework over that framework, try MongoDB instead of Postgres, etc. There's a lot of I won't say it's an old boys club, but some of this information is very, very hard to find, just because for so many people in the industry, it's taken as a given, or it's just they're not really super inclined to share what's in their toolbox, if you will. Just some of it can be hard to find, and when you're new, you don't know what you don't know. So having friends who actually know what they're talking about is massively helpful. It is invaluable, and it is 100% the only reason why I was able to get this job and be successful in this job. And all day I'm pinging those people in group chats. What do you think about this? Do you think my architecture for this is stupid? Do you think this is a good idea? What are people generally using for this? And that happens a lot because this is DevOps, and there's a lot to know. CI/CD, there's some development, there's some high availability, there's infrastructure, because almost all of my stuff is on premises. There's networking, hardware. It's kind of a little bit of everything that I need to know, again, well enough in order to deploy in an enterprise setting with a high level of confidence. So having people who know what they're talking is absolutely invaluable. You can find those people on Twitter. There's very active tech communities. Reddit can be pretty good. Stack Overflow is more for specific questions. And also there's forums for particular topics. Like right now I'm trying to dig into HPC for a personal project. And that can be hard to come by. You have to do some digging if you don't know someone in that particular field. So that's that. Have friends in high places. Number 2, your first language matters. Most people will say your first language doesn't really matter because all languages are doing the same thing, albeit in different ways, etc., yada yada. And to a point, that's true, but I don't think it's true enough to give that advice to most people. What I think is more accurate to say is that your first language, if you've never coded before, should be something that is strictly typed and compiled, so that it's like learning to ride a bike with training wheels. It's a good idea to understand what's going on, or have a better sense of what's going on at the hardware level, and get used to getting comfortable in your mind and in your fingertips. Data types, what is what data type, what is what size, what does this thing expect as a data type, what is it going to output as a data type. It's good practice. And it's a good idea in general. Because when you have something like Python that's dynamically typed and it's all interpreted as far as data types, it can get messy. It's not a great learning environment, because it's a very, very good idea to have training wheels, at least at first. And once you get really comfortable with something like C or C++ or Go, which I'm in the middle of learning just for the sake of it, so that I can take a little bit of my own advice, because Python was my first language, and while I don't regret that, it could have been better. So once you get comfortable with a strongly typed, compiled language, transitioning from something like that to something like Python is going to feel like dessert to you. It's going to be easy. It's going to be so human readable. It's going to be so straightforward, with 1,000 packages and external third-party libraries to make things so stupidly easy. It's going to feel like child's play, and that's what you want. You want to do the hard work up front so that the rest of it can be a nice downhill cruise. I promise you. Because Python will give you a dopamine shot faster, but it's going to be challenging when you realize that at the enterprise level, most companies are not shipping Python. They're shipping a compiled language frequently. Obviously not all the time, but very, very frequently, especially for back-end stuff, large stuff at scale. It's going to be compiled languages, C, C++, Go, things like that. Get used to feeling stupid. When you start out, especially with something like DevOps, which is like 6 inches deep and a mile wide, there's so much to know. It's going to be overwhelming, and it's just a lot. There's no way around it. In any industry is this way. It doesn't matter if it's blue collar, it doesn't matter if it's white collar. If you're getting in for the first time, there's going to be a lot to know. It's going to be difficult to keep straight in your head, and that's just unavoidable. So it's best to get comfortable with feeling stupid, having to Google a lot of things. I promise you, professionals who have been doing it for a decade or more are still Googling things that they forget from time to time. It's not going to kill you, I promise. No one's going to think you're stupid for Googling some small syntax thing, why your for loop doesn't work, you can't figure it out, and you're like, oh duh, forgot the colon or whatever. It's totally fine. It's going to happen. Number 4, treat learning like a day job. So by that I mean clock in and clock out. When you're doing it, however, you're learning this, because I assume you're going to be doing it in your off time when you're not at your 9 to 5, unless you're in NEET or something, you're doing this full time, 8 hours a day, learning this stuff, is to clock in and clock out. So when you're doing it, when you sit down in front of the computer and you're trying to learn and you're working, you're building something, that needs to be what you're focused on. Treat it like college class, and the grade really matters, for your GPA before graduation, and the final is coming up. Take notes, get help, seek wisdom, documentation, all of this kind of stuff. You need to take it seriously if you want to feel comfortable when it comes time to truly take it seriously, which is to say having a job in the industry, which is the end goal, right? So take learning seriously. Don't just randomly do it here and there. Ask ChatGPT a question and read 500 words of an answer and then not come back to it for several days. Persistence is key. It's not going to stick if you're not doing it, not necessarily for a long time. Not everyone has a lot of spare time. I did this on, 1 to 3 hours a day, 3 or 4 times a week. But consistency is going to be key. That's the only way it's going to stick in your brain, I promise you. And the next is to do what professionals are doing. So that includes languages, like I mentioned earlier. That includes learning things like version control, because I promise you, you're probably going to have to do that in a job. Even if you're like me and you work by yourself, version control is going to matter, because you're going to jack something up in the code base. You're going to have to revert back. You're going to have to find problems. You're going to need a record keeping of some kind. Just learn it. That also includes frameworks. When you're doing front-end stuff and you think, well, do I want to do Django? Do I want to do React? All of this kinds of stuff. And this goes back to having friends in the industry. Ask people what's going on. Another thing you can do is browse job listings. You can say, look up, front-end development, and what are most job listings asking for? They're asking for Django? Well, probably not. Are they asking for React and Node and things like that? JavaScript, whatever it is people are using this week. That's the thing you need to learn, because that's what people are asking for, because that's what people are using. And, when it comes to my particular case, like DevOps, what are professionals using for CI/CD? Are they using GitHub? Are they using Jenkins? Are they using something else? How are they implementing Kubernetes and high availability and all this other stuff? How are they dealing with networking, reverse proxying? Are they using Nginx? Are they using Apache? Why are they using one or the other? What's the justification for it? All this stuff is worth considering, and it's good to know what's going to be expected of you in a job. Because if you do something in, if you learn Python and no jobs want Python experience, well, then that's kind of pointless if the goal was to get a job in the industry. So, and you can always learn what you want to in your spare time after you get the job, but when it comes to getting the job, you need to have what people want. My next suggestion is use GPT, but don't be a vibe coder. For the love of God, don't vibe code, because it will give you the dopamine shot earlier, faster, harder, but I promise it'll bite you in your butt when you're just giving it prompts, taking the code, it doesn't run, you're feeding the code back into GPT, you're saying it doesn't run, it causes this problem. GPT tries to fix it in its very poor attempts, and it circles the drain very quickly, and it goes badly, and you end up frustrated, and your tokens are running out, and your responses are getting slow, or you're getting timed out, or you're getting, you're pegging out your daily usage on Claude for the day. It's going to be more painful in the beginning, but I promise you want to actually learn it, because asking ChatGPT and getting an answer is not learning. There's got to be the trial and error process involved. You have to break something. You have to research why it broke, study Google error messages, figure out what caused that message, fix it, on and on and on until your thing works. And now you've actually learned it rather than just be given a solution, which isn't going to help you. I promise it won't. Maybe in the short term, maybe you can fake it till you make it for a little while, but it will come back to get you in the butt when you have a 5,000 or 10,000 line code base, and guess what? You can't feed all of that into ChatGPT and say, find this problem. It just can't be done. And then you will just, potentially get caught with your pants down. You don't want that, especially as your first job in the industry. You really don't want that. So take the time, really and truly learn the language or the framework or whatever for real the first time around. It'll be slower, but you'll be glad you did it, and then you'll be able to talk about it intelligently and knowledgeably to other people, especially hopefully in an interview. Someone asks you something about a particular framework. Why do you like this framework? Why do you like that language? Why do you dislike this language? And you can give them a real answer instead of trying to BS them. So the purpose ChatGPT does serve is asking questions. If you really want to use it, and I can understand why people may want to, if you really want to use it, ask it questions. Don't ask it for answers. If you want to say, I'm having this problem, in my code base, in my app, which is supposed to do X, Y, Z. And you can explicitly say, don't give me the answer, but give me some suggestion as to where I might be going wrong. And it will do that for you, which is, not optimal, but that's still better than just straight up asking GPT or Claude or DeepSeek for the straight up answer, because there's no learning involved in that. So if you really want to use it as an enhanced Google. Don't use it for answers. And if in 5 and 10 years, when the job market is saturated, the industry is saturated with people who got jobs with vibe coding, and suddenly they're in way over their heads because they vibe coded their way into a job, and now they don't truly know how to code. And you want to be competitive against those kinds of people, well, there you are. You actually learned your language. You did the time. You have to do the time at one point or another. It's much, much easier and less embarrassing to do it on the front end as a noob, because then you're expected to take longer, make mistakes, be in a position to ask questions, seek advice, or simply say, I'm not sure how to do this. That makes a lot more sense when it's your first job rather than after you've been in the industry for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. 3, 4, 5, 10 years. My last suggestion would be, in lieu of formal education, I don't have a formal education in coding. I have a math degree, which included one class in Maple, which I did not appreciate, didn't take advantage of. In lieu of a formal education in comp sci or something that is going to directly benefit you with coding or DevOps or development of any kind, portfolio is everything. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it pertains to the kind of job you want to have, whether that's front end, whether that's back end, whether that's machine learning, whether that's database management, whether that's full stack, API development. It doesn't matter. It just needs to pertain to what you want to do in the real world, and it needs to be meaningful, or that is to say, it needs to demonstrate skill. If you write a fast API that's 20 lines in each of 5 Python scripts, that's not impressive. Your project needs to demonstrate that some effort and thought and planning and a little bit of architecture went into what you built. And when you put that work in for real in something that's truly challenging, you can speak about it intelligently. You can speak about the challenges, how you overcame them, if you were able to overcome them, if you had to work around them, if you came up with something novel, or at least you think it's novel, that you didn't get from ChatGPT or Google or Stack Overflow, what you liked about it, what kind of, what you appreciated about that type of problem set. All of those are really, really great answers in an interview. So in my interview, obviously the person interviewing me, who's now my direct supervisor, asked me what I built. And I said, well, I can show you the repo for this project because I had it on GitHub. I can show you the repo, or I can, explain it to you if you like. And he said, yeah, sure, explain it to me. So I spent, 10, 15, 20 minutes, a very large portion of the interview explaining what this app did in great detail, because that was before GPT was very popular. I didn't know what it was. And I spent a lot of time in the Django and SQL trenches. And I had a good bit of scars, a good amount of scars to show for it. But, as a result, I was able to speak to it intelligently about, every blade of grass that was in that field that I grew and mowed into a nice green manicured app. So, and it doesn't matter that your portfolio consists of things that are already made. Most of the things that any of us make as hobbyists have already been made. That doesn't matter. Like I said, it just needs to demonstrate some kind of challenge and the fact that it required some thought. If you just make me a 4-function calculator into Kinter, I'm not going to care. Neither is anybody else. But if you could make a calculator that was, somehow predictive, or some kind of interesting AI wrapper, or it did really complex math, like Fourier transforms or differential calculus or something, and you made that from scratch, that would be interesting. And it also graphed it for you, even more interesting. It did some other kind of analysis that's commonly found in software, even more interesting. You made your own small version of MATLAB, 10 out of 10 interesting. You get where I'm going with this. So that's more or less all that I had. I think that was 5, 6, 7 tips, but I feel like all of those are a good summary of what I found to be important, in preparing for this job and getting in this job and now being as successful as possible in this job, given that it's my first in the industry. So hopefully you found some part of it beneficial. If you feel like one of my opinions was stupid, feel free to comment it. But otherwise, thank you for watching.